In the peaceful suburb of Arlington, Virginia, life moves slowly, and the lawns are always neat. However, beneath this calm exterior lie hidden secrets. The community is known for its beautiful homes and perfect families, but it also holds stories of desperation, betrayal, and longing that could ruin its image of perfection. In June 2019, the Miller family, consisting of Lana, a 60-year-old retired schoolteacher, and Richard, a successful real estate developer, seemed to represent the American dream. However, behind their closed doors, their marriage had become cold and distant. What started as a strong partnership had turned into a routine devoid of emotion. For Lana, it felt like a slow death of intimacy. For Richard, work consumed his life, leaving little room for anything else. Then came Dylan Carter, a 26-year-old landscaper who had moved into the neighborhood a few years earlier. With his charm, youth, and energy, Dylan was everything Richard was not. He was attentive and interested, and most importantly, he was available. What began as friendly conversations between Lana and Dylan quickly grew into a passionate affair, fueled by a desire to escape the mundane. But like all secrets, the truth would eventually come to light. As Dylan's obsession with Lana intensified, so did the tension in their lives. One fateful night, this passion led to violence, leaving Arlington forever marked by the horror that unfolded behind the Miller family's perfect facade. Little did they know that this was not just an ordinary affair. It would result in murder, deception, and a scandal that the community would never forget. To outsiders, Lana Miller's life appeared perfect. She lived in a beautiful colonial-style house, surrounded by well-manicured lawns and gardens, carefully maintained by Richard. Their home symbolized success and stability, and the Millers were known as a power couple who attended charity events and hosted dinner parties. However, inside their seemingly perfect home, Lana felt empty. After 40 years of marriage, she and Richard had grown apart. Their conversations had dwindled to short discussions about bills and family matters, often revolving around Richard's real estate projects. The love and passion that once filled their marriage had faded over the years, leaving a relationship based on routine rather than affection. Richard's work consumed him. He was constantly meeting clients, managing properties, and seeking new deals, which meant he was rarely home. When he was around, he seemed distant, his mind elsewhere. Although Lana had become used to his long hours, the loneliness was becoming unbearable. At 60, she found herself reflecting on her life, realizing how much time she had spent catering to others and supporting her family. Now that the children had grown and moved out, Lana had nothing but time to think, remember, and regret. She longed for the days when Richard would come home, sweep her off her feet, and express his love for her. Those days felt like a distant memory. It was during one of her gardening days that Lana first met Dylan Carter. He was the young, fit, and charismatic landscaper hired to maintain the gardens of the Miller home. Their lives would soon intertwine in ways that neither could have imagined. Lana had an easygoing demeanor, always ready with a joke or a compliment. Dylan found her attention intoxicating. He noticed her in ways Richard no longer did. Their conversations began simply, chatting about the garden, the weather, and neighborhood gossip. As the weeks went by, they grew more personal. Lana opened up to Dylan like she hadn't been with anyone in years. She shared her feelings about her marriage, how lonely she felt, and her disconnection from Richard. Dylan listened intently, offering sympathy and understanding. To Dylan, Lana was different from the women he usually met. She was older, but she had a grace and confidence that drew him in. He found her stories, intelligence, and vulnerability fascinating. Initially, he convinced himself their relationship was just a friendship, that he was merely being a good listener. But deep down, he sensed something more. One afternoon, while Richard was away on business, Lana invited Dylan inside for a drink. The air was thick with tension. Soon they found themselves sitting close together on the couch, their hands brushing against one another. The electricity between them was undeniable, and Lana's heart raced. This passion had been missing from her life for too long. When Dylan leaned in and kissed her, she didn't pull away. From that moment, everything changed. What had begun as a simple friendship quickly transformed into a full-blown affair. They started meeting regularly, sneaking around whenever Richard was out of town. For Lana, it was thrilling. She felt alive again. She was no longer the neglected wife. She felt desired and needed. But with that thrill came guilt. Lana knew what she was doing was wrong, and that if Richard found out, it would devastate him. Yet the thought of losing Dylan was unbearable. She felt trapped between the life she had built and the passion she had found. As their affair intensified over the next few months. Each stolen moment together was filled with excitement. They met in secret places, the back of Dylan's truck, the guest bedroom at the Miller home, or the hidden corners of the garden. The thrill of sneaking around was part of the excitement. Dylan's touch sent shivers down her spine, and each kiss left her wanting more. Their relationship became her escape from the dull life she shared with Richard. She spent her days eagerly anticipating their next meeting, which became the highlight of her weeks. However, as their affair deepened, complications arose. Dylan grew dissatisfied with being Lana's secret. He wanted more. He wanted her to leave Richard and commit fully to him. He became resentful of hiding in the shadows. Dylan began to push Lana to make a decision, professing his love and expressing how he wanted to build a life with her, insisting that Richard didn't deserve her. Initially, Lana dismissed his pleas as foolish. She knew leaving Richard would ruin her financially, socially, and emotionally. She had built her entire life around her marriage, and the thought of walking away terrified her. Yet Dylan's persistence wore her down. He made promises, telling her how they could run away together and how he would take care of her. Swept up in their passionate affair, Lana started to entertain the idea of life with Dylan, free from Richard and her marriage's constraints. The turning point came one evening while Richard was away on a business trip. Lana and Dylan lay together in bed, the room filled with the scent of their passion. Dylan turned to her with a serious face and said he couldn't continue living as her secret. He needed her to choose him or Richard. Lana's heart raced. She loved Dylan but wasn't ready to give up her life with Richard. The conflict tore her apart, and for the first time, she realized how deep she had fallen into this affair. Over the following weeks, the tension between Lana and Dylan escalated. Dylan became more possessive, demanding that she prioritize their relationship above all else. But Lana struggled to do so. She felt trapped between two worlds, the safety and security of her life with Richard and the passion and excitement of her time with Dylan. Meanwhile, Richard began to notice changes in his wife. Although he was often consumed by work, he wasn't blind to her shifting behavior. She spent more time away from home, her phone buzzed constantly with messages, and she seemed distant even when they were together. At first, Richard attributed it to boredom, knowing Lana had felt restless since retiring. He thought she was simply finding new ways to occupy her time. But as weeks passed, his suspicions grew. Lana often disappeared for hours with vague excuses about running errands or visiting friends. Richard couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her phone, which used to be left unattended, was now always by her side. Whenever it buzzed, she would quickly glance at it and turn it face down. The subtle changes in Lana's behavior, though small, were undeniable. Richard's suspicions grew stronger. He watched her more closely, noticing little things he had previously ignored, the way she would absent-mindedly smile at her phone, the rush to shower as soon as she got home, and her newfound care in dressing, even for insignificant outings. For years, he had been distant too. Richard had ignored the signs for a long time, but now they were impossible to miss. One evening after Lana left the house again, he decided to investigate further. Once she was gone, he picked up her phone, but it was locked, a new precaution she hadn't always taken. His heart sank as he realized how little he knew about the woman he had been married to for so many years. As he moved through their home, he noticed more troubling signs. There were receipts from restaurants they had never visited, new lingerie he had never seen her wear, and most concerning, a scent on her clothes that was definitely not his perfume. He even discovered that a bottle of wine, which he had been saving for a special occasion, was missing from their cellar. He sensed something was terribly wrong. Desperate for answers, Richard hired a private investigator named David Jensen. Jensen was discreet and experienced, and within days he had uncovered more than Richard expected. He followed Lana and reported back with shocking evidence. She was meeting Dylan Carter, the young landscaper who had been working on their property. Richard's heart sank when he saw the photos of them together, sharing kisses in hidden spots and holding hands like young lovers. It wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown relationship. The betrayal overwhelmed Richard with a wave of anger and pain. He also felt guilt at his neglect, driven Lana into the arms of another man. For years he had prioritized work over his marriage, and now it seemed his indifference had pushed her to find comfort elsewhere. Knowing this didn't lessen the hurt, and he struggled with how to confront her. Divorce? Revenge? He didn't know. And he wasn't a man who acted on impulse. Meanwhile, the affair between Lana and Dylan intensified. What had started as a thrilling escape for Lana quickly turned darker, increasingly demanding, wanting more of her time and commitment. At first, Lana enjoyed his attention, feeling alive and youthful, but as his demands grew, so did her anxiety. He began showing up unannounced and pressuring her to leave Richard. His obsession became suffocating, and Lana felt trapped, caught between the excitement of their relationship and the realization that it was spiraling out of control. Dylan's behavior grew more erratic. He would call her late at night, drunk and demanding to see her. One evening, after a heated argument, he showed up at the Miller home while Richard was away on business. Terrified that a neighbor might see them, Lana tried to calm him down, but Dylan wouldn't listen. His anger exploded as he accused her of using him. Shocked by his rage, Lana realized how dangerous their relationship had become. This wasn't the Dylan she had fallen for. The next morning, she decided it had to end. She couldn't live in fear or lie to Richard anymore. But breaking up with Dylan wouldn't be easy. She feared how he would react. Still, she had to find a way to break free. When Lana met Dylan that afternoon, she tried to let him down gently. She explained that their affair had become too complicated and that she couldn't continue living a double life. Dylan didn't take it well. his face twisted in disbelief and anger as he warned her not to leave him. "You can't just walk away from me," he growled. "I gave you everything. You're not going back to that old man. You're mine." Lana tried to reason with him, but it was pointless. Dylan's obsession consumed him, and he refused to let her go without a fight. For the first time, Lana felt truly afraid. On the night of August 10th, 2019, tension between them reached a breaking point. Lana spent the day trying to find a way to end their affair. She knew it wouldn't be easy, as Dylan had become unpredictable and aggressive. With her husband Richard away on business, Lana turned off her phone to avoid Dylan's constant calls. The silence made her uneasy. She felt something terrible was about to happen. As the night dragged on, she attempted to distract herself with wine and a book. But her thoughts kept returning to Dylan. What would he do when he realized she was serious about ending things? Just after midnight, the doorbell rang and Lana's heart raced. She knew it was Dylan. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, and Dylan barged in, his eyes filled with rage. "You can't just leave me," he shouted, gripping her arm painfully. Despite her attempts to reason with him, he wouldn't listen. Terrified, she struggled free and grabbed a fireplace poker, hoping to scare him away. But he laughed menacingly. Before anything else could happen, Richard returned unexpectedly. He sensed trouble and walked in on the confrontation, which triggered a violent fight between the two men. Lana screamed for them to stop, but it only got worse. Dylan seized the poker from Lana and struck Richard in the head, causing him to collapse on the floor. Lana froze, horrified at the sight of her husband lying in a pool of blood. Dylan stood over Richard, shaking and in shock, muttering, "Oh God, what did I do?" But Lana couldn't focus on him. She rushed to Richard's side, desperate to stop the bleeding. As she cried for him to hold on, she realized she needed to call for help. But Dylan was still in shock, unable to move. Panic set in as Lana grabbed her phone, her blood-stained fingers fumbling with the screen. She dialed emergency services, her voice frantic as she reported the situation, pleading for an ambulance. Richard collapsed on the floor, blood pooling around his head. Lana and Dylan felt the weight of the moment hit them hard. The man Lana had been married to for over 40 years lay motionless, while Dylan stood over him, still trembling from the blow he had dealt. Lana's heart raced as she knelt beside Richard. His breathing was faint, and his eyes were half closed. "Oh my God, what have you done?" she muttered in panic, pressing her hands to his head to stop the bleeding. But the blood kept flowing, and Richard's skin turned pale. "Richard, stay with me," she cried, but he didn't respond. His breathing slowed, his pulse weakened, and then it stopped. Time froze as Lana realized Richard was dead, and her husband was gone. Dylan stepped back, pale and terrified. He looked at Richard's lifeless body, still holding the fireplace poker. "I didn't mean to kill him," he stammered, fear and disbelief in his voice. "Oh God, what did I do?" Lana's mind raced. What began as a secret affair had turned into something irreversible. Dylan paced the room, desperate to fix things. "We can't let anyone find out," he insisted. "If they do, we'll go to prison." But deep down, Lana knew they couldn't cover this up. There was no way to hide what had happened. As Lana sat in shock, Dylan took charge, suggesting they claim it was an accident. "I had no choice, it was self-defense," he said quickly. Lana shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Dylan, they'll never believe us." But he ignored her, grabbing towels to clean up the blood. We'll throw the poker in the river. No one will ever know. The thought made Lana's stomach turn. Dylan was driven by fear, willing to do anything to save himself. As he cleaned, Lana was overwhelmed by grief and guilt. She had once loved Richard, and now her affair had destroyed their life together. Dylan grabbed a duffel bag to dispose of Richard's bloody clothes. "We have to get rid of this," he muttered, his eyes darting around. But Lana knew the truth would come out, no matter how much they tried to hide it. "We need to call the police," she said quietly. Dylan froze, anger and fear on his face. "No, we can't. Do you understand what will happen? We'll both go to jail." Lana didn't reply. Deep down, she knew he was right. Their lives would be ruined if the truth came out. Lana felt she couldn't live with the guilt of covering up Richard's death. After a long pause, she stood up, her legs shaky, and called 911, shocking Dylan. The police arrived quickly, turning the Miller home into a crime scene. They questioned Lana and Dylan separately as paramedics pronounced Richard dead. Lana explained the confrontation with Dylan, detailing how it escalated out of control. She didn't sugarcoat the truth, knowing it was ugly. Dylan claimed he acted in self-defense, but the police were skeptical. Evidence like blood spatter and the position of Richard's body suggested it wasn't self-defense but an attack. Detectives found incriminating text messages and photos on Lana's phone, revealing the affair. They also recovered a bloody fireplace poker from a nearby river, strengthening the case against Dylan. He was arrested for second-degree murder, while Lana was taken in for questioning. News of Richard's death and the scandal spread quickly through their community, and Lana faced betrayal from friends who shunned her for the affair. Dylan's trial in January 2020 drew media attention. The prosecution portrayed him as jealous and controlling, while the defense argued he acted in self-defense. Lana testified, admitting to the affair and expressing remorse over Richard's death. After weeks of dramatic testimony, the jury found Dylan guilty, sentencing him to 25 years in prison. Although Lana was not charged, she became a pariah in her community, losing friends and facing rejection from her own children.